Welcome to the Stellified podcast. And today I have Shea Bilé with me. Shea is an author, he's a lecturer, a musician, a performance artist, a podcast host, and a researcher and devotee of esoteric practice for nearly 25 years. Shea has delivered lectures and workshops internationally with a focus on left-hand path occultism and has served as both a visiting professor and a guest lecturer at various universities. His writings have appeared in numerous print and digital publications, and his most recent published book being Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left-Hand Path, a book of occult philosophy. So welcome, Shea. Thank you so much for joining me today, brother.
It's a pleasure and an honor to be on, Anthony. I respect the work that you do, and I respect and the fact that you're willing to bring on different voices onto your platform. It's a very important domain for us to establish in this world of such contrasting perspectives and destructive polarization, that we bring together voices that are able to have a discourse. And so I respect you for that.
I think it's really important, Shea. You know, not everybody in the world can agree. It's not possible. We've all got our own perceptions in life. And I think that's very, very important that we have those. And we're going through this journey of life and as individuals. And but I realize that I don't want to be ignorant. And that's one of the reasons I really want to speak to you, because I know this is a subject that has given me reason to avoid, if you like. No,
Sure.
So I want wisdom in my life. You know, if I'm going to go through this journey, I don't want to be on my deathbed at the end going, "Well, I've just avoided that."
Well, you also don't want to be on your deathbed saying, "I gave that guy." I broke bread with him for a moment. Please forgive me. So it's right now. It's a roll of the dice for you, unfortunately.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. So okay, this is where we get going then. I mean, I really hope you can help me out with this and remove that ignorance that I have, with the hope, you know, that maybe it'll help others with the ignorance as well. Because
I hope so.
We've talked, you know, before. I was brought up a Christian. You know, the thought of even the name Satan. The thought of Satanism itself brings me with particular dread or resistance, if you like. I can feel it, you know, and that comes from my upbringing. Plus, you know, Shea, when I was growing up, I was a big Hammer House of Horror fan as well. So I was a kid, I was shown loads of horror films, and these particular films, they leave an imprint, especially if you're going to watch them as a child.
Sure.
So Satanism itself, you know, like Rosemary's Baby, when I was like, that was a terrifying film, which is linked to what they would say is devil worshiping Satanism. So
sure, they were classy though. The Satanists in Rosemary's Baby were classy, and they knew their way around scotch and a good time. Right. So Rosemary's Baby is a beautiful film. It's a beautiful film, to be fair.
It's an incredible movie. Absolutely incredible. Yeah. But this is where I don't understand Satanism. And most people in the circles I'm in don't understand it. You know, the first thing they will jump on is, well, that's satanic. You know, that's evil, that's satanic.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So straight away, I would like to understand why someone like yourself, because I've listened to you, we've had a conversation before, you're an incredibly lovely man. What is Satanism to you? Why did you end up down this left-hand path?
Sure. So I understand the knee-jerk reaction and the Christianized, at least in the Western world's perception of Satan or Satan, and that position it holds in our society. Satan ultimately represents the universal principle of evil, violence, hatred, so on and so forth. And there's a whole history behind why that is. And perhaps there'll be some time in our discussion to kind of go over how that became what it is. But first, I want to extend that I understand. I've lived this life for all of my adult life and even further, now over 2.5 decades, that When there's people who are hesitant, when there's people that carry some doubts, even when there's some people that act out of ignorance, not fully knowing who I am, just knowing that title, I first extend a bit of sympathy rather than be reactionary. So trust me when I say I've come to a part in my path where I try to extend a sense of sympathy and empathy to understand why some might have a particular reaction. It totally makes sense. Now, how did I come to associate myself with one of the most hated figures, ideas, and religions in the world and in history? Well, I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up by little means. My parents were of little means. My father was an ex-Vietnam vet and a factory worker, working class, blue collar, and my mother was on disability, and that's the life that we lived. So we lived in some of the poorer areas of Los Angeles. And I'm an elder millennial, so I grew up in Los Angeles during the '90s when there was incredible political tumult because of the Rodney King riots and everything that was going on with the police department versus kind of racist policies. And the city was on fire, literally and also metaphorically, right?
Yeah.
And I grew up in the midst of that. And of course, I felt displaced. Of course, I saw the danger around me, but I saw violence around me. I saw drug addiction. I saw desperation of all kinds. Desperation from socioeconomic desperation, desperation of identity. So I grew up in something like a war zone in the United States in one of its worst, most shameful eras. And I learned a lot seeing that. I learned a concept of surviving. I learned a concept of fending for yourself. I also saw the worst in people, and I was bullied intensely. I'm not gonna lie about that. And other spiritual paths around me didn't seem to have an answer. Of course, the abusers identified with Christianity, and they told me about God and Christ and so forth.
Yeah, the
And
Christian of them.
right, and they seem to be the one who were doing the most evil, were the ones who championed Christ and the Bible and Christianity. And I started to look into the world of the esoteric. One, I was interested in things like fantasy and comic books, and just like any other kid, but for me, it was a bit more, I wanted to dig into other worlds. I wanted to find a way out of the environment I was in. Because it was as traumatic as it is and as horrible as it. So of course I was trying to find a way to disappear. And soon after, I kind of accidentally fell into, I was in this massive used bookstore in Long Beach, California. My father used to take me to these used bookstores, and I ran into the metaphysical aisle, and I came upon a book called Psychic Self-Defense by Dion Fortune. And I opened it, and it had all these amazing ideas about the astral plane and about spirits and about elementals and about, she talks about this interaction with a werewolf that comes out of her solar plexus, and she does battle with these spirits. And it was so wondrous. But one thing about it that separated it from some of the fiction I've been reading is that this is real accounts of the world. And I thought, wow, there's real power here. And I quickly became attracted to the world of the occult because I realized there's a way I can finally defend myself. I can do something about this situation. I can make changes to my life, finally have a way to protect myself, defend myself, and empower myself when no one else is going to do it. And when I first started to read the Wiccan literature, it talked about the law of three. And if you do anything negative towards someone, it's going to come back to you. And I thought, there's some horrible people around me that deserve judgment and deserve punishment. And are you telling me I won't be able to defend myself against horrible people? And it sounded a lot like some of the Christian doctrine that a lot of Christians don't follow, by the way. The idea of the idea of doing harm against no one, protecting the weak. A lot of people that identify with Christianity don't believe in that anymore. Christ's message. They don't follow Christ's message anymore. And Wicca seemed to repeat that part. But what didn't make sense to me is that didn't relate to me. Maybe to some middle class, upper middle class people who weren't dealing with confrontation and violence on a daily basis and violent reprisal. That I didn't identify with this. You can't defend yourself. You can't do so. Wicca didn't make sense. And I fell upon around the age of 13, 14. I came upon the Satanic Rituals by Anton Szandor LaVey and the Satanic Bible. And I read it in one sitting at a very young age. And I was enthralled because although, he talked a lot about, there's a lot of things about embracing self-centeredness, embracing, worshiping oneself as a god, seeing the world as a place of struggle, and that you are not going to, no one's going to necessarily defend you or help you, and no one's going to come down to save the situation. You have to defend yourself. It's a world of decreasing or limited or scarce resources, and it is upon you to try to survive in this environment. And it said your enemies deserve your hatred, and those you love deserve your love. And one should completely actualize and embody. It was a very Nietzschean kind of active, nihilistic, redefining meaning in life, with Satan as this symbol of liberation and emancipation. And it was what I needed to hear at that young, vulnerable time. I needed to hear that I have value in myself, and that there's that I don't need someone to place value on me or define what my value is. I have the right to do that for myself. And I needed to hear that. And it saved me in a very real way. And ever since then, I'm not a LaVeyan Satanist today. There's a lot of different Satanisms, and I think we're probably going to talk a little bit about that. But LaVey was very atheistic. Well, LaVey himself wasn't atheistic. His movement was atheistic. I'm not atheistic necessarily. I'm far more spiritual and religious. However, from that moment, I have determined, based on exactly what we just talked about a second ago, in order to make the world understand that this is a viable path, and this is a viable way for one to identify, to be empowered, and one answer to the world, a legitimate one. And despite the judgment, despite the history, that this can do good for people, and it is a positive force in the world. Although complex, it is a net good to the world, and it is of the good. And it's something I've decided to devote my life to until the end of my life, to defend this creed, and to defend this option, and to defend this philosophy and this faith as a viable one and a valid one. And even if someone doesn't agree with me, I'm going to have a seat at the table. And I'll be damned that my voice isn't heard in this effort.
I love your passion, though, Shea. I must admit, I do. I can feel the passion coming straight through the screen, and I think that's so important that people have whatever path they choose, is they feel it from the heart, as you clearly do. Did you when you went through that initial period, and you said it helped you? How did it help you stand up to those bullies? Did you feel protected? Did you use any kind of spell itself? Were you able to do anything?
Yeah, so I think what it did is I leaned into, because I was already being picked on, just to being picked on. I was a poor white boy, as one might say, and I was already being picked on for that. But I doubled down. And I started just dressing the way I want, kind of gothy. It was the 90s, so I'd paint my nails black, and then use the black metal makeup. And doing that in the hood was absolutely insane. I don't know.
Credit to you.
I had a lot of courage. I doubled down. And what that did is that steeled me, because I decided to lean into it. And I decided that I'm going to survive this situation, and I'm going to get through it. Another thing it did, now I could talk about the magical things that happened. Yeah, I was able to use magic to enhance my situation. One of my primary abusers, I was able to use magic to, let's just say, it had a dramatic impact on that situation. I
Wow.
was able to take people who were doing evil in my life, and I was able to heal, and I was able to survive the situation through magic. Also, philosophically, psychologically, another thing that occurred is I went from hating who I was. I went from I'm ugly, I'm poor, I don't have value. Everything they're saying must be right because everyone seems to think that. And it switched the other direction. I thought no one around knows what I know, and they must hate the information because they seem to really hate this thing, and I understand it in a new way. And there's a reason they do that. And so I felt smarter not only than from the other kids around me, but I felt smarter than the adults around me because they seemed to judge me without thinking or asking questions. They started to treat me strangely. For example, after the Columbine shootings, a friend and I were pulled into an office and said, these kids said that you guys might shoot up the school, and they had us take off some of our clothes, and they had us take our fingernail polish off, and they examined us now today, and they suspended me. And that moment I realized even those who are supposed to be smarter than me, because at every point a child has a realization that their authority may not be perfect, their parents may not be perfect, and it's a reckoning that every human being goes through. Yeah. And I had that happen a little early for me, for my parents and my family. However, for authorities outside my family, that's when it happened again. I had a reckoning where I realized there is something about me that they don't understand. So it created quite an empowering situation where I felt I am 13 or 14 years old. I was aware of this, and I realized I understand something that they seem to not be able to understand. And it did help me rather than make me feel. So there were tough years. I'm not going to lie. Okay. It was tough years. And then into my adulthood, I had other challenges. But in the long run, it is the one thing that saved me from, I think, a worse lot.
Wow. So what is it then? What is Satanism then? What's the principle of it? What? Because I don't understand it. You see, I'm only because I'm ignorant, by the way, and I haven't looked into it.
I think what's great is that your search for wisdom. I mean, this goes way back to the Socratic stories of the one who confesses he is of little knowledge ends up being one of the smartest ones in the room. So the fact that you're questing and you're looking for wisdom places you to our particular informed place. But
well, it's just you, Shea, because the people that I know think I'm dumb. So,
so there's yeah. I mean, Satanism has an illustrious history. I think if we go back even at the very beginning of the foundations of the formation, the early years of Christianity, around the 2nd century BCE, and how it developed into its Neoplatonic model, and from transitioning from Judaic scripture and the Torah and the Old Testament into what we call the New Testament and the Council at Nicaea and this whole thing. The minute the theologians, the early Christian theologians, decided that they're going to say that Satan is this universal principle of evil, up to that point, there was a collection of different demons: Asmodeus, Satanel, Shemyaza. So if you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Qumran texts, there's all these different demons that are mentioned in the apocalyptic literature. But it's decided around the 2nd or 3rd century that Satan is going to be the central figure, the universal principle of evil. Well, as soon as you did that, what you did is you created a class system, and you created that there's God and everything is associated with him, and then there's the other guy. And throughout what would happen over the centuries is that some people on the edge of society, some people who were at the edge of poverty, criminality, people who were downtrodden, people who looked to the rich and the literate and the wealthy. And while they're living in scraps, there was a few people in the historical record that decided, I'm going to cast my lot with the other guy because that other guy seems to understand me more. They're telling me I'm going to hell. I'm struggling here. And there seems to be a safe place here where someone understands my plight. And this would go on until about the 19th century. And then you had the Romantic poets, William Blake and Carducci and the others. And they would kind of talk about Satan as an emancipating figure. They saw what Nietzsche would call the death of God, so of being central meaning in the world, the death of that central meaning, God being the center of everything in culture and society. And they saw that beginning to whittle down, and they began to look for answers in other things. And Satan as a emancipatory figure, post-Enlightenment, post-French Revolution, taking the king and let's gut him and impale him on the. So all these noblemen, all these wealthy figures, the powers that be, the elitists, the these wealthy ideologues and these robber barons were put to task and said, well, you associate with the church, you associate with God. So it's very natural to say, well, then our hero is Satan and Lucifer and Prometheus and these different characters in mythology. And that would then develop into the modern era as there was some philosophers in the late 19th century then going in and esotericists. And then it was truly popularized in the mainstream and on a global scale by Anton LaVey in the 1960s. And what it ended up at first being is that Satan is a symbol of liberation, emancipation, freedom, scientific discovery, inquiry, everything the church had traditionally stood against. And that an innovation and was about self-empowerment and was about this informed and empowered antinomianism that is saying that you cannot set laws and thou shalt. I'm going to question all of them because society and its moral code came into question. So it makes sense. It says that Satan is at the central of questioning. He's the adversary. And it brought in some of this occult, some of the darker sides of the occult, but I really like to think of it as the aspects of the occult that were misunderstood to that point. And it really put it front and center as viable forms of spiritual expression. And then from the 1960s, it would grow it would splinter into all different groups. But if I tell you one thing that Satanism represents among all the different, now it's dozens of Satanisms that exist around the world, I would say one thing that sets at the center is that Satan, Lucifer, whatever other figure sometimes Lilith, sometimes Inky, or they use different gods and goddesses to represent this thing in the left-hand path. There is a narrative of liberation. There's a narrative of self-empowerment and what's called apotheosis. So reaching a godhood, bringing one up to the divine, connecting one to the divine. There's another one about antinomianism. Question what you are forced to do. Question what you're told to do. Question what the powers that be are telling you to believe. The power of inquiry. This is all. Also, the freedom, the openness of association. So also open and affirming in the sense of no one is going to tell me or judge me for what I am. So obviously, the Satanic, the Church of Satan was the first to allow homosexuals and to allow Black folks in the priesthood and things like that. It was the first church to really be open in that way. I think in the West, actually. And so that message of no matter what the world thinks of you, I'm going to put it to challenge, and I'm going to ask why, the whys and wherefores of your most holy laws. That's what it says in one of the first parts of the Satanic Bible, the whys and the wherefores of your most holy laws. It's a religion of questioning and of inquiry and of self identification and self discovery. So, regardless of what Satanism I'm talking about, whether they believe in Satanism as a literal being, whether they believe in occult forces, whether they're more atheistic, whether they're secular, regardless whether they're left wing or right wing, because this Satanism encapsulates both. It's about that drive towards inquiry and drive towards empowerment and drive towards apotheosis and freedom.
So it's like a sovereignty exercise in a way. It's finding your true self.
Absolutely. Don't tread on me.
I wouldn't dare.
No, but the Gadsden flag, you know, the traditional. I say that tongue in cheek, but it really is, and it's interesting that this came to be in the United States. You know, its earliest forms came in the French Revolution. It makes sense that this movement would really take form in the United States, because there's of all the things we think of the United States and its struggles, one thing is we've had our own political upheavals, and we've had our own political conflicts of one seeking towards independence and sovereignty and freedom. If you look at the original deviation, and the colonial settlers left what they saw as a constriction and an enslavement by the Western Europe and those powers at that time, wanted to find a better place of opportunity. And so it's in that spirit of sovereignty, as you say, that spirit of independence. It makes sense that in San Francisco in the 1960s, that Satanism would be born out of a place of revolution and revaluation, or transvaluation, as Nietzsche would say.
I mean, you mentioned demons before as well. So, I mean, this is where the resistance comes in, because obviously, as a person brought up in Christianity and people in the West, angels and demons are the players, the big players, and angels are the good guys and demons are the bad guys. The bad guys are, you know, are the ones doing the evil in the world, aren't they? You know, that's what we're brought up to believe. And, you know, and demons are representative because very dark figures and hideous, if you like, and scary. Whereas angels are more, well, they're angelic, aren't they? They're beautiful and they're light beings and this, that, and the other. So, so the more you're more drawn to that. But I get where you're coming from in terms of, it's quite interesting, the people that I've come across that are supposed to have Christian value, you know, they're supposed to follow the scripture of Jesus Christ, if you like, and follow his path, but they're the ones that tend to be a bit more dangerous, it seems. That's been my experience as well in some aspects. But also when I was a kid, I remember being forced to pray for my stepdad, who was an atheist, and they told me that, you know, I must pray for him, otherwise he's going to hell, and I was literally put into fear. That didn't seem that point in my life, and I was only young myself then, Shea. I think I must have been about 10 or 11 years of age, and it was at that point I was going, well, this is supposed to be about love, and I'm scared right now, you know. And I can remember lying awake at night thinking my dad's going to hell if I don't get him to accept Jesus into his heart. And you know, that's not very Christian in my view. But what do you think?
Because that was moving against his identity and his sovereignty, right? I mean, he was wanting to. You're saying that praying against him because he was an atheist and praying for his soul, you felt like that was going against his independence and his free choice.
Well, no, I was scared for him to be going to hell. I was painted a picture that my dad was going to go to hell. If he wasn't going to accept Jesus into his heart, he was going to hell. And as a child, that terrified me. But that's not very Christian-like, is it? That's not coming from a part of love.
Yeah,
there's fear.
No, absolutely. There's a line that comes to mind from the comedian Bill Hicks, where he says, "You ever notice the people that you would know this because it was on the movie Zeitgeist, and they quote him.
How do you
And
know I watched that?
yeah, yeah, and uh, and the line goes that, you know, you're on a ride and it's fun, and there's frills and thrills, and you're excited, and um, and when things get bad, you have some people that get off and say it's just a ride. You can get off anytime. You don't have to stay on this ride. And he says, you
Mm.
ever notice we kill those people? And people like Malcolm X or Martin Luther King or, um, you know, Gandhi, and there's in the sense that we Socrates. So
Yeah,
there's a tradition of Joan of Arc, so on and so forth. So there's a
yeah,
tradition, Christ as well. There's a tradition of those who speak out against the powers that be, or those who speak out against enslavement, are ones that are usually targeted. The ones who ask us to question uh, the world around us, and to question the values that we're told. And I think
yeah,
that's at the center of Satanism. But I would like to say this as well. I think Christ is a fascinating figure. One would think, because I'm a Satanist, that I would immediately, let's turn the
mm.
crucifixes upside down.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah.
No, no, but I look. I I think I really see Christ Luciferic. This is controversial to say. One, I mean, he's referred to as a morning star in
Hmm.
the Bible, but or the son of the morning. But you know, Christ fought against the powers that be of his time,
You did.
and at least as far as the mythology goes, he saw the gamblers in the church, and he cracked his whips and stopped the money lenders and the gamblers, and he brought the downtrodden around him. He brought around the poor and the downtrodden for him to protect and be the voice of. And he was eventually rejected by his own people and the Roman Empire, and he died for it. He never stepped down. That to me is satanic, and that to me is antinomianism and rebellious. That's a satanic act, what Christ did, and there's a satanic quality to his rebellion. So I have a respect for the Christ figure, as in standing for or representing what you believe is a hope for life and for the future, and really showing love for the downtrodden
Mm.
and fighting for it to the point where you bleed yourself dry. And even at the end, his human side, why hast thou forsaken me? A very human act, his final human act, right? So
Yeah,
the story of Christ is a powerful one, and it's a potent
yeah,
and inspiring one. However, that message is 100% lost by the people that represent it today. So if you look at the modern Republican Party in the United States, and if you look at elites in general, people who take payments in order to legislate and answer to oligarchs and answer to corporatocracy, but it's openly embraced philosophically on the Republican side of the United States. On the Democratic side, they kind of dress it up a different way. But you do have this existing in our positions of power. But you see those identifying with Christianity not caring at all about the downtrodden, not doing
mm.
anything to help them, and using all the, using very superficial rhetoric, but not actually helping, the people that put them to power. So both Anton LaVey is an important voice here, Lucifer is an important voice here, Christ is an important voice here, Satan is an important voice here, to remind us that we do not have to be beholden to these to the powers that be that are telling us how to live, to tell us who we are. to enslave or enchain us, and that we have value. Just like in the film The Network, my life has value, right? He says,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in this explosive appeal, he says, "God damn it, my life has value," and that is what Satanism teaches us, and that is what Christ teaches. It happens to teach as well.
I agree, and I was when you were telling me this that story, which is superb the way you put that, by the way. I can imagine the amount of cognitive dissonance with people watching this. They will just go off. Switch
Well,
that off.
I want that. It should be uncomfortable. It
Yeah,
should be
yeah.
uncomfortable, but we
Yeah,
can
it's
use
got to
that
be challenging.
Yeah, we could use that discomfort to learn something.
Absolutely.
To learn something, because I think it's going to take. We have some false prophets that have come to take power in our world, and they hide behind They hide behind a superficiality of this religious doctrine in order to come to power. But it's clear, it's incredibly clear that they are so blinded by their elitist position in society, the distinction between haves and have-nots, that they've invested everything they can to make the individual feel small, that everything in the world is geared against them, that the whole world is going to crush them, that everyone hates them, and that they have no power to change any of it, that the cogs of the machine are running and running and whirring, and it's deafening and it's blinding, and there's nothing you can do to change it. There's all these people in smoke-filled rooms with cigars who are smoking and deciding what you're going to do. Now, that whole message itself, that whole world, one thing is it's trying to tell you is that you can't do anything about it. There's people more powerful than you that you have no chance to do anything against. And you have the oil men, and you have the Soroses, and you have everything else. You have Russia, and you have everything else, and you have these hidden parlors that are telling you that you have what it is a message of disempowerment. And I don't care to subscribe to something that I don't have power to change. I don't care to subscribe to something that is telling me I'm chained down and that there's these fuck the elitists and fuck the oligarchs. I'm not going to be told what my value is, and I'm not going to be told that I can't do something about it. And again, that's what these people teach us. That's what Satanism teaches us. And again, this is what the voices of Buddha and Christ teach us as well.
100%. That's what, and my understanding of Christ is exactly that. There's no way he would be standing up with all that nonsense that's going on right now. He'd be well against it. It's just, they're crushing people. Surely if there's an evil, it's the fact that these greedy types, whatever they are crushing the small man all the time.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
People's mental health in this country, in the UK, is absolutely to the shit right now. People are struggling. People are using food banks. It's horrendous, and this all comes from pure greed. Which this is why it's great to have you on, Shea, because most people would class that evil as Satanism. That's what they would class it as.
Sure. But I mean, here's the thing. Let's look at the Gnostic. I'm sure a lot of your audience probably identifies with the Gnostic conception. These were early Christian conceptions of the world. They saw the material world, especially during the apocalyptic era, when you had a lot of these cultures that were merging, and there was a prosecution of a lot of different people, and you saw an acknowledgement of what's called the problem of evil, which is that why, if God exists, why do we exist in a world of suffering? And so, in order to reconcile this idea of suffering, they started to think of different ways to conceive of the universe, a theodicy, as you might say. And for the Gnostics, there's dozens different conceptions within the Gnostic mythology, but generally speaking, when we refer to a Gnostic conception of metaphysics, we say that there is the demiurge that created the material world, and you have the archons underneath this demiurge, and you have a god, a hidden god that exists beyond this material world. So this is a world of suffering, and we want to not return to this world, but find a way to get to that real world to be closer to the ultimate divine. So thinking of that, I mean, in fact, the Old Testament God was viewed as a tyrant, a violent tyrant who wished for a tribal God. Yahweh in the beginnings, in the very beginnings of Yahweh's conception, was amongst the tribalistic feuds, and Yahweh was a god of war and storms, and this was a tribalistic god. And then just because of the different interplay of cultures and wars, ended up becoming central to the Judaic religion and to the Old Testament, and then would change into the Platonic God, the Neoplatonic God, which would become the New Testament. But the reality is, the Gnostics saw that initial creator as a thing of evil. So I would posit to people who view Satan as the bad guy, one, if you look in the Old Testament, Satan, especially famously in the book of Job, Satan is a district attorney. God sends a Satan to judge Job and check his faith, and does his dirty work. As Alan Watts would say, Satan is the district attorney. He was part of the divine council, Satan was. So when Satan was first thought of, there was an evolution and worked on the side of God in order to put people to task and to judge them when God didn't want to directly have his hand in it. So what I would ask people who say this is the satanic conception, look at the Gnostics, them identifying the Old Testament God as a tyrannical God, and I would look to the history of Satan, that was not initially evil in the beginning, who was actually a force closest to humans, understood their toil. So don't believe me thinking I'm switching and being metaphorical and being symbolic, and there is a place for that. But look to the Bible. Look to the earliest Christians on how they saw Satan and what Satan represented. It wasn't until a few hundred years that Satan became this symbol of evil. But before that, it was a lot more complex and a lot more complicated. So I merely ask people to look towards the beginning and understand that this is a later history where Satan became what we understand today. So if you question the powers that be, and you question what people tell you, and they all say Satan's evil, everyone says Satan evil. So if they're telling you if they're telling you that this is what's happening in the world, listen to me, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and they're telling you this is what the world is, and media is telling you what the world is, and you want to say, hey, I'm not gonna listen, all of them will say Satan's evil. All of them will say, they all agree that Satan is evil. So aren't you going to want to question why that is? And if that makes sense, you'll question everything else, whether they're going to war for profit, or whether they're doing this, or whether they're telling you you must live a certain way, or be a certain way, or buy a certain car, or eat a certain way, but you're not going to question that they all happen to think Satan's evil. Why are you going to believe that one thing and then question everything else they do? You need to question that too.
I agree totally. I'm with you on that. It's very interesting. Speaking of the elites, sticking with these elite globalist type characters. So you mentioned earlier on, obviously, about occult practices and the magic of this realm that we're in, because obviously we can. I know this realm is magic. I've experienced it myself. So I know these things work. So do you think they practice sort of a dark magic, if you like, to put spells on populations, if you like, to make things work for them in a law of attraction kind of way, if you like, where the populations would be able to create a reality for them.
That's fascinating. Okay. So there is evidence that the government has invested in things like remote viewing. This is irrefutable. This isn't Reddit posts or it is true that the government has invested in understanding remote viewing. They also invested in like Project Blue Book, so the Philadelphia Project, and there's been different things to investigate the world of the supernatural or the world of the unseen. There was also an investigation into radionics. I'm sure you might be familiar with radionics, but for your audience that may not be, it's this idea of taking a machine that uses either an electrical pulse or electromagnetic pulse, and then you place, like, for example, you place a photograph of crops that are being overtaken by some infestation by insects or something.
Yeah.
And then you would take that photograph, you would run this surge through it, and then you would spray insecticide on the photograph, and then they would notice that there's a drop in the fields of this infestation. So things like that. So the government has investigated it, but I think for the most part, they weren't able to get a complete hold on it. From what I can tell, from my research and my investigation into it, it appears that they weren't able to get an exact hold on it. And I think a lot of people, their problem with magic is that it's not an exact science. It's an imprecise science. And for a government who's trying to be efficient, who's trying to get something done, magic doesn't communicate well to the contemporary frame of mind. Our mental frameworks, living within cities and modern era, does not, and in a scientific world, does not, and materialistic world, does not relate well to what's viewed as the imprecision of the occult sciences. Magic works on this lattice work of consciousness and will, and it's hard to speak definitively on exactly how it works or in what way it's going to work, because we don't always know. And I think that is that's not very valuable to the various governments. And so I think they found something to some of this stuff, but I think it wasn't worth investing in, because we'd rather buy a missile and drop it on a unsuspecting city. So that was a better investment of the money than investing in magic. Now, another side to your question: do we use things that are like magic to manipulate the masses? 100%. Look at any fascist society in history. Look at the way they dressed, down to the colors they use. Look at our corporations, which are fascist in a way, in the West, and the various capitalistic systems and the fascist systems on different government models in the 20th century. You notice that down to the colors they should do, down to their texts, down to their scriptures, down to the philosophies that mattered to them, down to the brands that you use. Look at McDonald's, the golden arches, and Ronald McDonald is like Christ. And there's that one image where they showed several things to some children around the world. They showed images, and they showed George Bush, and they're like, I don't know what that is. But then they showed the golden arches, and they said, oh, that's McDonald's. And the kids were able to identify McDonald's before they could identify Christ. They showed a picture of Christ, and half of them were like, I don't know what that is. But the golden arches, everyone was able to recognize it. So that's a degree of fascism. That's a degree of magic. The golden arches is like a sigil that's teaching you that I'm hungry, I'm excited, I'm doing this. And that's what fascist idolatry is able to implant into the political framework in order to make you do a certain thing, or to make you act a certain way, or to implant an idea. So to that extent, I think governments around the world have used magic, sigils, and emblems and branding in order to assign mass hysteria, and in order to assign lock and step mass hallucination in that way.
Yeah, that's without a doubt. That's without a doubt. By the way, the first Ronald McDonald scared the shit out of me, I must admit. But the thinking of, I was just thinking while you were talking then about Bohemian Grove as well. Why do you think the elitist type kind of do those
That's such
kind
a
of
funny situation. I remember when Alex Jones did all his work down at the Bohemian Grove.
Yeah.
But okay. From what I could tell about the Bohemian Grove, what it is some very bored and very daring brotherhood that comes together to do this interesting to do this ritual and to enact this mythology. It's brazen. But I think it's performance art. I think it's performance art. I think it's a bunch of horny middle-aged elitists who come together to kind of have fun and have a party and poke fun at some of the conspiratorial satanic panic. I think they really exploit the symbols of the satanic panic, and it's a bunch of bored elitists, or it's a bunch of bored rich people that come together to perform this mock ritual. And I think it's a distraction. I think it's a distraction in the sense, let's actually look at the things that are plaguing society, and let's look at the things that are actually happening. But it is,
Yeah. I'm just fascinated by it, especially because it's a subject that we're talking about and why they would do rituals. But
I don't think they're actual magicians. I don't think there's any magical intent behind it. I don't think they're trying to exact a change. And there's much more efficient ways to them to get what they want, like squeeze as much as they can out of the proletariat, or squeeze as much as they can out of the people. There's other ways they can do it, like implant an idea on your smartphone, or some sort of political, or using or exploiting religion in order to drain people dry. That's a lot more effective than doing a ritual in front of a cheap owl statue out in the woods.
I like it. Yeah. Just moving subject slightly, because you mentioned Lucifer, and this is something that's kind of confused me for a long time. Is people tend to put Satan and Lucifer as the same being. Is that the case? Is there a difference?
Yes, it's a complex story, but there is a distinct difference between them, symbolically, mythologically, culturally, and ontologically. So, we look at the beginnings of Satan. So we have Ha-Satan coming from the Old Testament, what we could call the Old Testament literature. And this simply means an obstructor, someone who pushes back, commonly interpreted as an adversary. And you see it used really for human opponents. So a human that is pushing back, you see that in the earlier parts of the Bible, as they were written in chronological order. But you see it begin to be assigned to supernatural. The very first time you see it assigned to a supernatural being is in Numbers 22. It's an angel, a Satan appears to stop Balaam from cursing the people of Israel, and he's on his donkey, and then an angel comes down with a sword and blocks his way. That's a Satan. That's a Satan. But it's really a type of angel that is actually protecting it's protecting Jerusalem, rather. And then what happens is with when we transitioned into gathering the texts for the New Testament, what we'd call the New Testament, there were several demons that came from the apocalyptic literature. Coming from the 2nd century BCE, you saw all these different mentions of different the demonic council: Belial, Shemyaza, Asmodeus, Leviathan, all these things that were in the Old Testament and then in the Qumran scrolls. And it was just evolved that Satan is going to be the central demon, and that we need, and it combined with the idea that we need to address the problem of evil. Why do we exist in a world of suffering? And well, it couldn't be a perfect God that does it. And so through the works of Plato and Plotinus and that development over hundreds of years, it was decided that we have a perfect God that kind of removed himself a little bit, and you have all the suffering in the world is explained by this satanic force. And so that's how you have a perfect God, because he allows a evil entity in order to clash. And at the end of days, he's going to be chained next to the lake of fire, and then Christ will come down. So this took hundreds of years to develop as an idea. It was a philosophical, religious evolution, addressing a scientific evolution to kind of explain the different aspects of the world. So that's how Satan came to be. Lucifer is interesting. So there is Satael from the book of Enoch, who is described as an angel that falls from heaven. So again, this is 2nd, 1st century BC. It was discovered in 1947, the Qumran scrolls in the text. So it talked about this falling from heaven, this this angel fighting against God and then falling from heaven, and then having a resistance, a rebellion against the heavenly council. So that was Satael, was the name of that spirit. However, in the New Testament, you have Isaiah 14:12, and it's talking about Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And it says, "Thou hath fallen from heaven, and is the morning star." The Lucifer, the light bearer, is the Lucifer. And so what happened is a lot of these apocryphal texts that talked about the fall, it became folk tradition to talk about it. Oh, Satan fell from heaven and had a rebellion against God, and that was more of a folk tradition because it wasn't actually included in the New Testament. It was the apocryphal texts. And when people started to interpret Isaiah 14:12, they started to say, "Oh, well, the king of Babylon is a Lucifer, so this is actually talking about Lucifer." But that's then incorrect interpretation of the Bible. There is no Lucifer in the New Testament or Old Testament. There is no Lucifer. The only time you have a Lucifer is when it's talking about like a light bearer, the morning star. Christ is mentioned as a morning star like 2 or 3 times. And then you see the king of Babylon is mentioned as a Lucifer. There is no Lucifer in either of the Christian or the Jewish texts. So, or in the scripture. So really what it is folk tradition, apocryphal text, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then carried because it's an interesting story that speaks to the sentiment of man. And then when you get to Milton's Paradise Lost, he really writes this satanic epic about the fall, and Satan becomes this very real character, and Belial and these various demons. And that's how we have Lucifer today. It's not biblical. It's not evidenced in the Bible. There is no Lucifer that fell from heaven. There is no Lucifer in the scripture that fell from heaven and opposed the heavenly council. That doesn't exist in the scripture. There is a different type of spirit in the book of Enoch that has that story, but it's not related to Lucifer at all. It's a later identification that was done centuries later.
Does when you mention Gnosticism, because I'm
but I'll add one more thing. Let me add one more thing. So what do we end up with? Well, Lucifer is actually if you look at Lucifer's original, he's the son of Aurora. So he's a light bearer. So he brings the morning dawn, also the Venus star, which the day and the night star. So it's one who it's a solar deity. It's like Apollo. Lucifer is like Apollo or like Christos. Christ is a Luciferian figure in that he's a solar deity. He represents this lighting the world. He's actually referred to as the morning star. So Christ is like I see the Lucifer character, Lucifer, as a Christ-like figure who brings a light to the world. And I see Satan as being a mix of different things personally, but his story is one who questions. He's close to the earth. He forces one towards inquiry. He challenges the powers that be, and he questions. Lucifer is also rebellious, but represents the light of the world and the light of man, very similar to how Christ does. And I think that's closer to the mythology. And to conflate the two, I think is confusing, incorrect, not factual, and blasphemic. It's blasphemic to conflate.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so you're certainly taking me on a path of wisdom now, because I'm removing myself now from this ignorance, which is wonderful. So in terms of the Gnostic way, then the demiurge and the archons, do you feel that's more like our realm then? So there is a divine past this potential copy. Do you feel that?
I do, but I call myself an omnitheistic Satanist or a satanic omnitheist. I love all the different facets and aspects of Satan, not just the mythology, but the scripture and the stories and Lucifer and all those different. I think they speak to the human story, and also they speak to a search for hope and for faith, and for the human spirit to rise up and to question. Now, I also appeal, and there are some Satanists that you might call anti-cosmic Satanists who are Gnostic in nature. One group is the MLO, the Misanthropic Luciferian Order, who in contemporary Satanism, they move more towards the Gnostic conceptions, and also what we would call the Kelipot, or the cliff author, which is the tree of death, as opposed to the Zephirot, which is the tree of life. And this is from the Zephyrotic literature that the mystical Jewish scripture. So the idea that we exist in a world of tragedy and sadness and hatred, it makes sense. I think in our times when we see such horrible things happening around the world, when we see horrible things happening in our world to our brothers and our sisters, I think we want to think, how can this be allowed to happen? How can this kind of world exist? Why do I see my brother and my sister on the streets begging for food? Or why do I see my brother and my sister seeking out substances in order to cope with this world? And why do I see sadness and tragedy and hunger and hatred and war and greed and torture and slavery? And this makes sense. I ask myself the same question, and I understand the idea to think that holiness exists beyond this or before this world existed. So if we think of the world as if we think in the concept of the Big Bang, there's discussions on whether that's the most accurate model of the universe beginning. But let's just, for sake of argument, let's say that the world existed with rapid expansion. And whatever that moment is before that, people will say that was ultimately holy. And then they'll say what exists outside of that world is ultimately holy. The nothing, the holy nothingness, because it existed before this world of suffering, before this world of chaos. And it makes sense for us to reach to something outside of this plane, outside of this chaos, outside of this hatred, to try to understand a holy, what is holy of us. It's the concept of Tzimtzum, Tzim, Tzum, Tzimtzum, which is that God when God left the world after creating it, and he only left a part of himself, a spark, in human beings and everything else, and then exited the world. It's a Jewish mystic conception to also address the problem of evil. Well, it says that the reason the world is evil is because God has removed himself from it, right? So I think, and you'll hear that I speak of things in two ways. I'll speak of them in an analytic, anthropological way. So you might hear me say, this is the idea, and this makes sense because of culture and because of psychology. But I also speak as a man of faith and do that. So I don't want people to think this is an atheistic analysis of the world. I'm a man of faith, right? But I also think that the secular world is important as well. That is to say, what makes humans operate and what we seek in our faith. And I think there's a place in Satanism to see that there is a God outside of creation that is pure, and that is pure in essence.
Yeah, I really like that. Can we touch on a real difficult subject, Shea? I hope you don't mind. And that's a very topical kind of discussion that happens in the awakened community.
I will say no discussion on Satanism or any of the work I do would be possible without a difficult conversation.
Okay, well that's good. You're you're cool with that then. Okay, so satanic ritual abuse. That's something that is. You know, I've got a friend who is an author. He's a fabulous author, actually, and he's spoken to many unfortunate people that have been at the hands of such abuse. Why, when, you know, why use Satan then in that respect? I mean, obviously, they're painting this deity as the bad guy, aren't they? You know, so is that the reason why it's satanic ritual abuse and not labeled as such in another way?
I'm going to be an adversary, and I'm going to ask you, after your friend discussed satanic ritual abuse, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, my thoughts are that, you know, it's whatever this situation is and what these people are going through is absolutely abhorrent. It's evil, and it has no place in the world that I want to be in.
Sure.
But I don't have a label for it apart from evil.
Sure. So I'm really happy you asked that question for a couple of reasons. So, and it's really going to twist the way that we see the world. Now, there's a reason satanic ritual abuse exists today. The concept of it. I would like to take everyone back to the very beginnings of Christianity in the Roman Empire, and in the early Christian sects within the Roman Empire, there's a famous drawing, and anyone can go on to Google and look this up. One of the early drawings is of two friends. One of them is making fun of his Christian friend, and he draws a donkey on a cross, and that is making fun of him that he worships Christ. And because it was a minority religion, the Romans started to come up with certain ideas. One, they said they would engage in secret meetings and rituals, and they would engage in incest, and they would engage in child sacrifice, and they would engage in cannibalism, and orgies. And the Christians were the first to be accused of these things. And then a few centuries later, when Christianity became the dominant religion in the Roman Empire, they would start to say, well, it's the Jews that are doing that. They're meeting in secret, and they're doing these ghastly and horrific and evil acts to each other. And then they would say that about the Gnostics. They said the Gnostics were doing that. And then they would say that about every other Christian group. And then throughout history, you would get the Black Mass. So then it was the witches and the Satanists that are doing it. They're having this Black Mass. And what do they do in the Black Mass? They meet out in the forest, and the devil appears. And then if you look at the paintings of Goya, the beautiful paintings, by the way, his dark period where he painted these, he never meant for those paintings to be released, by the way. He painted them on the walls of his home, and they were found afterward.
Oh, right.
But the pictures of they're dropping a baby in a cauldron, and they're giving they're sacrificing children, and they're naked, and they're engaging in orgiastic sex. Well, why? So how did that come into the modern era? Well, there was a gentleman by the name of Leo Taxil in the 1890s. The first Satanic Panic happened in the 1890s. And Leo Taxil talked about the Palladians. He said there's a Freemason sect. So the reason today that people accuse Freemasons of this, of the Illuminati, the whole where the Illuminati comes from, is from Leo Taxil in the 1890s. And he said that there's this group of Palladians, which were this sect of Freemasons, meet in secret. And they're the satanic rituals, and they dress in these robes, and they're having orgiastic sex, and they're sacrificing children, and they're committing cannibalism. People were already questioning the Freemasons at the time. Christians were questioning the Freemasons, and he fed on that. And he published several books that talked about this. And it spread like wildfire throughout Europe, saying that the Freemasons are sacrificing babies. And really, Leo Taxil got it from a gentleman called Albert Pike, an American Freemason, who wrote a 600, 700-page book. And he has about 3 or 4 pages that says maybe the Baphomet of Eliphas Levi could be a balancing figure. Perhaps Lucifer is a balancing figure in the world. But it was 3 pages out of 600, 700. And Leo Taxil pulls that one little thing, and it inspires this whole thing. Well, this is what happens. A few years later, he pulls together this media event, and all these different media people and the newspapers all appear, and it's a crowded. And what he's going to do is say, I have the witness who's seen all these things, who's been through these satanic rituals and seen it. I'm going to bring her in person, so you can finally see that everything I said is true. Where he comes out on stage and he says, everything I said was a lie. And the audience wanted to tear him apart. And he had to exit through a back door. But the damage was already done. So everything we say about satanic ritual abuse, the Illuminati, George Soros, say people meeting in secret, sacrificing babies, all of that comes from the Roman Empire accusing Christians, and then later Leo Taxil and his movement, his Palladian movement, accusing Freemasons. That's where all of it comes from. Jay-Z doing his little symbol, to Beyonce or Lady Gaga on stage. All of it is derivative of that. And QAnon, I'm sorry for anyone that may be watching, your entire movement is contrived from Leo Taxil, and then before that, the Roman Empire. So when you think about that, if you believe Christ is good, and you believe the Bible's good, and you believe God is, and you believe in the heavenly order, then don't adopt the Roman persecution that was used against Christians. Because when you believe in the satanic ritual abuse, you're actually feeding into Roman prejudice against Christians 2,000 years ago. Now, what about the satanic panic of the 1990s? Well, you had innocent people. You had a lot of people that were accused. Different police departments received. There was Michelle Remembers in, I think, 1984. Michelle Remembers was a book released by a psychiatrist in Canada, and she talked about having these memories of being abused by a group of Satanists, and that started in the early 1980s, and that caught wind around the world, just like Leo Taxil's story did. And they said, and then a lot of people started having repressed memories, saying, I was abused, I was put into a breeding cult, and they were forcing me to make babies and all this. Well, it went on the talk shows in the United States and Europe, and it went on Sally Jesse Raphael, and it went on Maury Povich, and it went on Jerry Springer, and all of them started talking about, oh, these must be these satanic rituals that are happening. And then police departments started getting these guides in order to identify occultists, and all these people were arrested. And what it found out is that you had hundreds of therapists, lawyers, police departments all look into this over the next 10 years. And the evidence they found that any act of sexual abuse was happening in a formalized manner was fucking zero. And why that pisses me off is because innocent people were put in prison for different reasons, just because they were accused, or maybe they had slightly different beliefs, or none of that. Maybe people were just fucking making rumors. They lost custody of their children. And some people spent months or years in jail because of it. And they were eventually exonerated, and there was no evidence of it. So all due respect to your friend, but this type of stuff is used to hurt innocent people, and it's used to cause prejudice, and it's been used to hurt people in the past, and it's being used to hurt people today. And if you believe in freedom and you believe in individual power and independence, we're not going to feed into these ideas that hurt innocent working class people.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. No, I appreciate you bringing that to light. It's clearly this world is very dark, and a lot of really nasty shit is happening all the time.
Yeah, and I would like to say, like, there are people that do horrible things that are in power. Look at Jeff Epstein. Like,
Absolutely.
That's something that existed. The very rich and the very powerful usually get to break the rules and do what they want to do. And we have to start paying attention to that. We have to begin paying attention to the people that have this level of power and are able to get away and break the rules, get away with it. And we shouldn't empower those people, and we shouldn't give them the latitude or give them license to break the rules. So child abuse fucking happens, and exploitation of children happen. But let's not look in the wrong direction, and let's not be distracted from the people that are actually committing it and the people that are actually doing it.
It astounds me, though, as well, Shea, how someone like, let's say, you're Epstein or any individual like that does those kind of acts, how and what or where does that come from? You know, I mean, it wouldn't even. I don't know a single soul that would enter into such depravity. You know, it's like, where does that consciousness come from? Where
evil,
where,
right?
Yeah,
so you're asking about evil.
Yeah.
So you asked about demons as well, right? So
yeah,
I'm not going to go into a big history of demons. We could talk about that, but demons weren't always represented. Diamonds in Greek were intermediaries, like angels. Diamonds were angels in early Greek religion. Were just people you gave your prayers to, and then they would deliver. It's kind of like the saints in Catholicism. And so diamonds took an evolution and became evil right around the time that Christianity took form. These lesser spirits or tutelary spirits became symbols of evil as demons rather than diamonds. So I think the world is complex and has a lot of power. If we look at nature, so when a lion comes upon a gazelle and rips it apart, a child gazelle, just is born, and the hyenas are trying to get it, and the giraffe is trying to dodge. I saw a video of this recently, and the giraffe is trying to dodge and then accidentally kind of crushes her child, and then the hyenas rip it apart. From a human standard, that's evil. Like this is evil. This is but we don't think of it as evil because we think of it as the natural world. So I think the world as it is, I mean, if we look at the animal kingdom, we look at the praying mantis while is being inseminated by her partner, turns the head around and just crushes its head. And you'll say that's evil. That's weird, right? Well, we don't question the animal kingdom. So why do we necessarily question how it's capable of evil in our world? There is chaos in our world. There is struggle. There are things like suffering. Buddhism and the Buddha will talk about. We'll talk about moksha, or a state of suffering. So there is a state of suffering for human life. Now, what makes us differentiate as humans from the animal kingdom is that we're able to make a choice, right? So I think that there is evil in the world, but I don't see it necessarily as this disembodied concept. I think it's something that exists in nature, and it's our duty as humans to fight against it, and it's our duty as humans to recognize it. You and I think we like to think we're fighting for good, and we're not contributing to evil. And I think we need to really identify where that happens and what to do about it. But is there an evil force in the universe? Yes, but not in the way you think. I think the world and the universe itself is filled with chaos and evil, and also good. But the idea of evil and good, what was it before humans existed, right? So what was it when it was just animals on this planet, on this rock? What was good and evil then? So I think it is a part of our nature, and it's something that we fight to overcome. And yes, there is an evil, violent force spiritually that exists. However, it's one that I think flows and is interwoven into the universal tapestry, rather than this evildoer. Dr. Doom is coming down to make us do these things. So I just don't think that. I think everything is a mix of what we would call good and evil. I think it's just like demons and angels. I think there's a lot of angels that are actually quite fierce and quite militaristic and quite fearsome. So speaking strictly to people who are spiritual and full of faith, there are angels who are absolutely terrifying. Maybe more so than some of what we call demons, who some of them are absolutely fierce, but some of the demons are actually quite jovial and kind and listeners. And if you read their descriptions, even in the grimoires, which were written by a lot of Christian mystics, it would say, will bring knowledge of the past and geometry, and will bring good between friends. It's so Bile is teaching friends how to reconcile. So I mean, you can't read that and go, well, that's so evil. It's teaching friends and foes to be good friends with each other. I mean, read, right? So if you look at the grimoires, these were written by God-fearing men. These were written by Christian mystics who wanted to try to use Solomonic magic to control demons. Even the descriptions they wrote said they reconcileth friends and foes. And yes, there are demons who have certain violent tendencies, but they'll say they teach you wisdom and discovery. So, I mean, if you read those things, you could tell the demons are. Give 5 minutes in a Google search, and you'll see that the demons are complex spirits and not just this ultimate evil. The world is complex. Demons are complex. Angels are complex. And humans are complex. it doesn't mean we don't fight evil. It just means we don't try to blame some outside force for the evil in people. We hold them accountable and we do something to fight it, right?
But like you mentioned before about, magic and symbols and this, that, and the other, it can persuade a populace, a collective to look elsewhere anyway, can't it? If they can just make us look towards Satan, as you say, then everyone's going to look that way, aren't they? While all this is going on over here, we're all looking this way.
Anthony, that's 100% why I am so enraged and passionate about the subject, is because if we blame something outside ourselves, we're not going to look into ourselves to look at the evil that we do, right? We're going to blame something outside the world. And I think that's the biggest lie. That's the biggest lie. Christians will say, like Hal Lindsey, the famous evangelical, who wrote Satan is Alive and Well on Planet Earth, who wrote several books about the apocalyptic era. I also read the other side, by the way. I study them as well.
Yeah.
And it's this distraction from us looking toward the world that we live in. It's also a way to remove yourself from the evil of the world. If we see these things happening that we feel we have no control over, if we look at the political situation, we look at things that happen in our family, in our lives, disease and accidents and our health and poverty. And, it's easy to look outside of that and not address the world we live in. And it's easy to kind of want to exalt it to someone else. What's really painful and what's really hard is to actually embrace a world of suffering and to say, you know what, this is a world of suffering, and it's painful and it's difficult, and it may even seem like I can't do much to change some of it. But it's kind of like the Bill W. and the Alcoholics Anonymous. It says the power to one of the I think it's the third step or the second step, having the power to know what I can change and what I can't. So being able to differentiate what you can change and what you can't. I think there's actual power in that, to be able to understand what you can change about the world, what you can change in yourself, and do the best you can. If we look to people like Nietzsche, this is so heretical what I'm about to say. People like Nietzsche, people like Anton LaVey, people like Jesus Christ, people like Buddha. I see these all as prophets. And I think what they did is they identified the very best that we can be and that we can do about the situation, and how we can do good, and how we can find an answer to the world and do something about it.
Yeah.
So I think that let's not give power to something else. So even if you're a devout Christian, let's not give so much power to Satan that he immobilizes you to make changes in the world. Don't give that power to anyone. So I think exalting evil is not a bright idea, because it distracts us from looking for the evil in one another.
And I thought such an important message, and that the shadow work is something that I find very important to myself, to become more aware and observe myself as I constantly go through my journey, if you like, and recognize those shadow aspects of myself as well. I think that's really, if more people did that kind of inner work and that shadow kind of aspect, this world would be better. We can change the world.
I think so.
I think that's really important.
And I think what we're doing here in our own little way is attempting to change the world. It's attempting to make sense of things, to make sense of the world, and to be able to address it and speak to it.
Yeah, and this is me again removing myself from ignorance, because I'm not here to point fingers and put labels on things. There is darkness in this world, but there's darkness in me, and I need to address that as well. I'm not a bad guy by any way. I'm a good guy, but
yeah, I think that's a powerful trait for you, Anthony. And I think that's something to be admirable, is to question whether what we understand is to be absolute. So I'm not expecting anyone listening to this, you or any one of your audience, to suddenly say, well, I'm not going to think Satan's okay. I'm not going to accept that. I'm not asking you to. What I am going to ask you to understand is that there's a different way of looking at it, and that there's a lot of I find very compelling evidence for what I've suggested as an interpretation of the world we live in, and the interpretation of Satan, for the interpretation of Lucifer, for the interpretation of the evil force, for the interpretation of human nature, for the interpretation of the powers that be, and what human value is. I think it's compelling, and I think it's powerful. All I merely ask is that you try to listen, even if it's difficult to do so, and if it's uncomfortable to do so, and that you challenge, at least for a moment, challenge what you've come to understand about this world.
I think it's important. If we're going to change this world, we need to remove the cognitive dissonance. We've got to try and get past that. Like you said before, asking questions. Ask questions about everything. Everything. Don't just have blind faith.
That's what we're here for. That's what Stellify is about. That's what you're about. That's what these podcasts are about. We're trying to question the world, and we're trying to figure out new things. The number one thing you want to do is bring on someone that can articulate an argument that might be different from yours. I don't want to exist if I cannot withstand someone contrarian to my belief, a challenge to my belief. Your belief means nothing if it can't be challenged. It doesn't stand for anything. It's like having a certain seal in your car. If it can't be tested and it rips apart or it breaks up, if you have an O seal on a particular pipe or something, and it can't stand the test or the pressure, you're not going to purchase that. You're not going to trust it. The same thing with a belief. If you can't test it against pressure and heat and conflict, then that belief isn't worth much to you if it can't be challenged.
100%. 100%. Coming into the modern period now, because you've definitely taught me a lot today, Shea, and I really appreciate that. We're moving very quickly into what looks like a transhumanism type shift. What's your thoughts on that? What's your feelings on that? Is it good for humanity? Is it bad for humanity? What do you think? I
want to fully understand your question. I want to hear very quickly what you think of it.
Yeah, I'm in a mixed place. So if you would have asked me 12 months ago, I would have been like well against anything to do with AI. I was well against. I'm a creative guy, and I'm connected to nature, and I want to be connected to the divine, if you like. And I just see it as in the wrong hands, and I still believe this. In the wrong hands, it's dangerous for humanity. That's my belief, because they could cut us off and completely have control of humanity in the wrong hands.
Sure.
But I also now see AI as a potential force of good in the right hands, because I don't know what it is, but I'm using it more now, and I was well against it, and it's elevating my creativity. It's done the opposite to what I expected. I thought it was going to ruin my creativity, but actually it's expanding me. So that's quite interesting. So I'm more open to, I am a tech guy anyway, so I'm more open to the conversation. I do feel, again, as we were talking about, there is evil in this world, and I have a zero faith in the Elon Musks of this world, and I don't see putting chips in people's brains as Neuralink is a good idea. I'm not into that, in the wrong hands.
Sure.
In the wrong hands.
Sure. Yeah. So, right. So, I don't mean to be reductive, but I do quickly identify one broad feeling towards it, and that is a gun good or is a gun evil? Is a knife good or is a knife evil? A knife could be used to cut fruits and vegetables to feed to a child, a nutritious meal, but a knife could be used to stab an innocent man on the street. A gun is going to be used for violence, but sometimes violence is necessary to defend oneself, and sometimes it can be used to kill innocent people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one aspect of artificial intelligence and transhumanism is that it's a tool, and it's a tool that can amplify what is already there. So it can amplify one's intentions. If one wants to hurt, if one wants to kill, if one wants to give into decadence, or one wants to give into addiction, and one wants to give into impulse, then technology, AI, and transhumanistic models are going to amplify that for you. At the other side, in a world of discovery, what is artificial intelligence going to do? Well, it can help us figure out some problems, perhaps, that we are a bit distracted by. So we also have to understand this. I want to tell people this because I'm very hesitant to give power to something that has absolute power over me. Again, I'm a religious man, and I do think that there's spiritual forces and different things that I appeal to. But what I really speak is the human condition. In this world that I live in, I'm very hesitant to give absolute power to something. And so with AI and things like that, I want people to understand that AI is probably, at least as we understand it today, it's limited to the human knowledge base. Now, it may not have distraction. It may be able to give 100% of its attention at a time. And it may be able to have a lot of processing power, but it's able to look into what knowledge exists in the world already. It's able to go on, like if you look at the O3 model on OpenAI for ChatGPT, it does all these searches, and it's great. It's a wonderful tool, but it looks at what other people have already said, and it brings it all together, and it kind of comes up with something. Now, that's today, and I don't know how far AI is going to go, but what I do feel is that there's some really positive things that can come from it. So organ replacement. So instead of looking for organs and not having an inventory and being on a waiting list, you can just get a synthetic organ that's 3D printed. That's transhumanism. I think that's great. For people like myself, I've been wearing glasses since I was 3 years old. So replacing with like some implant, I don't know if I'd do it. I like how the glasses, I like how my glasses look, but I could get an eye implant and I wouldn't have to worry about this anymore. For people that have some sort of disabilities, they're not able to use their legs, they're paraplegic. I think that's fantastic. Transhumanist all the way to help people that have diseases and or come upon and to extend the human life. I think that's fantastic. Where I think it's another thing that might happen in advanced stages is when we all you and I are hooking up to a collective right now. Whether we want to believe it or not, you and I are connecting right now through a digital interface. Now, I have my identity as Shea Bilé, and you have your identity as Anthony. But we are kind of merging for a moment. Now, if you imagine in years where we start having, like you said, neural implant, AI-assisted processing, where we can suddenly in an instant meet with all our Facebook or Instagram or TikTok friends, and we could thousands be in a room and I can instantly understand what everyone is thinking at that moment. No reason to write it down. They can just go from thought to comment, thought to exchange, and then we all feel it. And then when a comment cannot just carry words, it can carry emotions, smells, touch, and other senses that we don't even know yet. I mean, that possibility. So a chat room being a merging of people. So if you come together in a chat room and it's a merge, not just I'm standing in front of you talking, but I merge with you and I instantly understand what you are thinking and what I'm thinking, and multi-sensorial sense. That is, I must say that is inevitable. That is something that will happen, and whether we like it or not. Now we can fight against it in some ways, but I think it's going to happen in one way or another. Now, this is a question. I think there's people that are going to fight to have a singular identity. I think in a speculative kind of future technology, there's going to be emerging. There are going to be people who resist, who say, I like being one person. And I'm not necessarily, I like Anthony. I like him being who he is. And I like being who I am. I'm not necessarily trying to become one person. I want to maintain my individual identity. So I think there's going to be arguments for that. And it may very well, look, VR hasn't caught on yet. Like
No.
VR has been around for years and it's not exactly caught on. It's not like a household item. So it may very well be that a lot of transhumanist things don't exactly hold water, and we don't get there. But I think it's a force for good. I think it requires a lot of oversight. And I think there's some questions spiritually about the idea of depersonalization that's going to happen as part of technology. And it's a scary idea. And here's what's interesting about it. I hope I enjoy a nice, full, healthy life before I have to answer that question.
I like that. That's a good answer.
Because I think it's something that we have to face, and it's going to be a very difficult question.
Yeah, I think so. Me personally, I think we can be psychically attacked as it is without having something where we could be wired up to the cloud and the internet of people, and you could be hacked in very easily. I don't fancy that at all.
100%. But I mean, imagine this conversation. Like, imagine if I could just upload everything I know and my feelings and my human experiences, and then you upload everything you know, and then in an instant, you already understand everything I am talking about, and I understand everything you're talking about. Right now, we're very resistant to that idea, but that it can actually solve a lot of problems, right?
It could do.
If you imagine Israel and Palestine merging for a moment, or Ukraine and Russia merging for a moment, maybe we think could be some empathy. I understand the pain you've gone through. I'm understanding your life experience, and maybe that will teach me to decrease kind of my violent or my prejudices against you. So I think there's positive sides of it, but also the sense of depersonalization, I think is it's a kind of apocalypse or Ragnarok of what we understand to be human identity. And that's something we're going to have to face in the next 50 to 100 years.
I would have thought so. But one thing I would say about what you were saying there about Palestine and Israel meeting together kind of thing, again, it depends on the people that's doing it. If you've got people with bad intentions, there's no empathy or anything, you've got no chance, have you? Because let's be honest, there's assholes in charge everywhere, isn't there?
No, 100%. But do you remember the movie Powder?
No, I'm not seeing that. No.
So there's a movie. It was like 1995 or 6. It's about this albino who's kind of kept in a basement, and he becomes ultra intelligent, and he's able to channel electricity, and he kind of has these kind of powers, but he's picked on and he's made fun of, and he's able to channel electromagnetism in the film. So there's a scene where a hunter shoots a deer, and the deer is on the ground dying, and he can feel empathy towards all life, and so he runs over to the deer, and he's in a form of shock because he's feeling it die, and he's trying to cradle it while it's dying. And the hunter comes up and says, it's kind of like, what the fuck are you doing here? And he grabs Powder. His name is Powder. He grabs the hand of the hunter and the chest of the deer. And the hunter drops his gun and starts shaking. And as he's feeling the deer dying, right? He's feeling it go through this death experience. And he realizes in that moment, what I've done is horrible. Because I can't, so when I think of that idea, I think that perhaps this idea of melding a bit might be helpful. Because if we understand what, so like in the case of mental illness, I am plagued with really intense anxiety. And it's intensive. And it's been torturous in certain times. Now, whereas it's positive, it gets my mind thinking, and then it gets me thinking about things, and it gets me kind of creative, and I try to find ways to channel it. But I think for people to understand what that might feel like, I could probably say for a moment, this is what it feels like, and they would understand it, right? And for people with schizophrenia or people with other kinds of mental illness, we can understand what their situation is like, or someone different from us. We can understand what their situation is like. So I think that's where a sensorial integration, I mean, we're really talking about speculative technology, but that's the way I think it's ultimately going.
I think so. I think it is, yeah.
I think sensorial integration is going to be helpful for empathy, because now you can't just, haha, fuck you in a TikTok comment. You can connect with them for a moment, and then you can go, oh shit, I'm sorry. Please forgive me for everything, so
yeah.
I'm hoping that it might cause some form of human empathy towards one another.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
Instead of just hacking it and hacking the
I'm just going to hack my ex-wife right now. and I've switched her off.
Yeah, no, right. So I think there's also some incredible evil that's possible as well. So
yeah, exactly. It's a double-edged sword, like most things, like you were saying. The knife, you can.
Yeah, but that's why I kind of question. I was never an Elon fan, even when through his whole story, I was never an Elon fan, and because I never felt that we should look towards a corporate king to kind of save us, like a corporate prophet, like a weird, like a rich prophet to come save us. I thought that was some of the things he was doing. SpaceX, I wasn't even too excited about because I felt it was for commercial interests, and I don't think space should be explored for commercial interests. Let's get some metals out of the moon and Mars. I think, it's revolting to me to take an untouched beauty of space and think of it in a commercial interest. I think it's disgusting and evil. But even now the idea of the neural implants, I just think that are you really going to trust someone who's deeply ingrained in the power structure with implanting something directly to your brain? I'm not going to trust a person like that in that situation. That's where I agree. That's where I might agree with your audience. I'm not going to take on this implant from someone that is so interconnected with the rich and powerful. I don't buy it. I'm not going to do it. Right. So, right.
You and me both, brother. You and me both. Yeah. Can you, before we close off, because it's been a fascinating chat, Shea, I really appreciate your time.
I've had a great conversation with you, brother.
It's been wonderful. Please tell the audience a bit about your book and what you're doing right now and what your plans are and how to find you.
Yeah, no, love that. So, Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left-Hand Path, the first edition sold out. But Miskatonic Books is producing a expanded, revised English edition, and that's going to be announced probably in the next couple of weeks. So it's kind of a sneak preview. And there's a Spanish edition of the book that's coming out through a company called Mano Sinistra. So it's going to be going to the Spanish-speaking world. And essentially, Friedrich Nietzsche and the Left-Hand Path just talks about the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche and how we could use it to fight nihilism. So how we can use these ideas to fight against a sense of meaninglessness in the world. So I think a lot of people in your audience would identify with that drive. I also have a course called "The Fire and the Wine" on the history, philosophy, and rites of Satanism, Luciferianism, and the Left-Hand Path. It's an 18-week course. It's over 25 hours. It's, from what I understand, I don't like to speak too much in absolutes, it's the most extensive and detailed course on this subject in the world that anyone has ever produced. And that's released through Miskatonic Books as an online course. And I'll give a discount code to you to give to your audience.
Okay, great.
So they can be able to knock off the price from that. But it's an 18-week course. I have a community for it on Discord, and there's a lot of lively discussion. So even if you're not interested in these topics directly, it talks about the human spirit, and it talks about rebellion, and it talks about fighting against convention and fighting against prescribed morality, and it's questioning the elitist class and questioning what you are told. So the entire thing covers different people in history, and then goes into ritual magic if you're interested in those things. So that's there. It's been a big effort of my life. And then finally, for those who are in LA, I'm on the May 24th. I'm doing a workshop called Left-Hand Path Practicum. So I'm going to go into daily devotional magic and daily magical techniques that anyone can pick up. It's very different than the workshops I've done in the past that are kind of scholarly or academic. This is actually talking about daily practice and things we can do to enhance our magical ability, sensitivity, and use this magical power, like I described at the very beginning of this podcast, to cause real changes in our life. And that's included in my course, but also in person, May 24th at the Crooked Path in Burbank, California. So if you're in the area at all, it's kind of a small space in the sense that it's about 30 to 40 people is what the place can hold. But if you get a ticket now, you should be able to get in. And these usually do fill up quick. And I love interacting with people on that front. Finally, later in this year, I'll be releasing a book called The Hymns of the Red Dragon. That exactly your question on demons or diamonds. It goes into a lot of the history of these demons and tries to tell a more truthful and honest story about the demonic spirits and ways we can interact with them in an empowering way. So that's everything I got going on.
And how do people get in touch with you, Shea? You've got a website, haven't you?
Sure. You can go to any of my social media. So Shea Bilé on Facebook, Shea Bilé on Instagram, Shea Bilé on TikTok, Shea Bilé on YouTube, Shea Bilé on Threads, Twitter, Blue Sky, so on and so forth. I have deferredgnosis.com. That's a podcast I've done. It's kind of a hub. I've been slow to get to a Shea Bilé website. I've been relying too much on the social media companies, so you guys can get on me for that. It's just building a nice, beautiful website. One, it's not our main place that people connect with us, by the way, but it's a nice hub. Maybe in the 90s, people went to websites, but
I know it's all changed, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, or if you're off all of that, email is always a great policy. It's Shea Bilé, SHEABILE @gmail.com. I think it's a great way, free of censorship, to get a hold of me, and I would love to speak to anyone who has a question about any of this or this world, I love talking to people, just like I've loved this conversation and this platform. And Anthony, I want to tell you before you sign off, it speaks a lot to you as a person. You've often said, "Hey, Shea, I'm ignorant. I want to learn," and that's incredible humility. What you really want is you're not afraid of ideas that may be different than yours or challenge yours. And that speaks to the nature of a good and wise man. And I think this platform, this interview and this exchange is proof that you're using your platform in order to bring together ideas of people, different people that are really have good intention, are trying to change the world and trying to, and I would like to think my efforts are doing good in the world. And I know you would hope to think the same thing. And I think what you're trying to do by bringing this together is that exact thing. You're trying to bring a net good to the world. And I thank you for that.
I appreciate that, Shea. The check is in the post, by the way.
Right.
Well,
You know, we
appreciate
don't.
that.
You and I aren't driven by such things necessarily.
No, I could do with some of it though. Some of it would help.
Fair enough.
But Shea, no, it's been an absolute honor, and I'd love to do this again sometime, brother. It's been
I would love
a
to.
joy.
Sure, maybe later with these projects we can have another conversation down the line.
Most,
and I would always love to, so long as the invitation is extended.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you take good care of yourself, Shea, and we'll catch up. We'll catch up soon enough.
Be well, Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You too.